Hey yo, it's Guido coming at you with a tactics talk, and I've got a replay sent in by Major Tom driving his Lorraine 42 Premium Tier 8 French medium tank. He's on Paris, loaded into the east side. Ground control to Major Tom. Hey Major Tom, you need to launch. What are you doing? We're just sitting on the launch pad here. So Major Tom has elected not to go down to the south. He's top tier in a 357. Normally I would say, dude, you need to get down to the lower area. But let's take a look at somebody who's playing an autoloader a little bit more carefully than perhaps Guido would. While I don't really agree with hanging out in the middle right here because you're really relying on the enemy to make a dumb move, which they will to some extent, you're not actively helping your guys down in the south where kind of a top tier needs to be. So we're going to trade a shot right there. We move, unfortunately. I think if you were just going to stand in and take the shot, you probably didn't need to move there. And you might have got that last one into him. Although I don't think you would have killed him without a couple high rolls. Trying to get away, the guy misses, and that's very fortunate. So I think you were lucky not to take another hit in there, and maybe two, depending on what the ARL was actually trying to do back there. And that's an example of why that spot is, for me, kind of an meh kind of spot. Yes, two tanks showed up. Yes, you got 911 damage and only traded it for one hit. But those are the dopey people. So this is an interesting philosophical discussion because it has come up on my channel multiple times with people telling me that, hey, maybe your idea of where the critical terrain is not always the right idea, and there's other ways to do things. And well, oh man, that just missed. And in general, I agree that that's true. This is just bad luck. Another ricochet. Holy cow, left them both on basically one shot. Although I suppose the T-29 is a two-shot. Back to the philosophical thing, though. For me, it's a matter of playing the odds. So I want to go to the place that most likely is critical to the game. Obviously, very obviously, depending on deployment, potentially on your setup and the enemy setup, you can actually take the road less traveled. I've had videos on that as well. And provided you've got a good reason for it, then go for it. The argument between me and you potentially on when that might be and which maps and setups allow that would certainly be then to taste to a large extent between different players, taking into account their relative skill and their success in doing so, and all of those kinds of things. So what we're watching here is Major Tom is using what I would not usually call a meta type of position. Although lots of people go here, I would say that it's people that in general are not very useful to their teams. However, Major Tom, being a pretty good player, is being useful. And so what typically happens with players who go to places like this and aren't that good at the game is he'd still be back there waiting, right? Oh, look, two guys came into my gun, so surely more guys will walk into my gun. But Major Tom is now flexing, so he's done some good work in the middle, dropped 2,194, which is fantastic for his team, although his team is losing a little bit. Now, this gets into my argument about going to the right place. Could Major Tom have kept some of his tanks from dying down there by taking his top tier tank down with them and fighting down in the south? I would say yes. The execution of that would depend on a lot of things, but as far as the initial plan of where I want to go, that is the place that I would go for the reasons I just said. I would like to keep as many of my tanks alive in the critical spot and be decisive at the critical spot. You'll probably say, well, Major Tom's being pretty decisive. He's at 2,971. But the counter question is, how many of those guys down there would still be alive if that gun had been at the critical spot? And dudes who are hanging out in the back or coming up the middle roads aren't really part of the fight unless you let them be. And that's my other argument with going to the strange places or not going to the meta positions or saying, hey, somebody needs to watch this avenue of approach or whatever. If you're a top tier, those are all fine on the face of it. If you're a top tier, though, and you're doing those kinds of things, what is the cost of that? What else is not happening because you're not at the critical terrain? But Major Tom is making it happen. He's at 2,971. He's got 3 kills. Looks like a lot of the enemy are camping up in the north right there. And for me, that's fantastic. So I'm going to take my top tier tank down to the south. We're going to beat whatever they send down there. I'm going to help ensure as many hit points and tanks of my own are still alive because I went to the critical terrain. And we're not walking into campers. Campers we can deal with later. Campers are always going to be camping until towards the end when they feel like they're either safe to move or they're forced to move. Why bring their gun into the game before it's time? Why not go take on the active guys, kill them at the critical spot, and move on? Now, this sounds like I'm getting on Major Tom's case about it. No, it's just because it's actually a pretty cool concept and a interesting debate to me in this game because of the strategic nature as far as positioning and repositioning and where you put your guns early, where you get early damage, and all that kind of thing being so important in this game. It is an interesting discussion to have. Major Tom is making the counterpoint that if you play well, you can do it the other way, and that's the other cool thing about the game. You can do it the other way. But I try to play the odds. Now, sometimes I play the odds and I lose. A one-off, however, example of the odds not working doesn't negate what you're saying. Neither does a one-off great example of going to the meta position prove that I'm right. However, over time, I would submit that the success rate does prove that I'm pretty close to right. However, I can be convinced I'm wrong. I am able to admit that. I think that is probably the biggest thing as far as learning goes in anything, but because we're playing a pixel tank game, we're talking about applying these kind of rather serious ideas of improvement and whatever to a pixel game. It certainly applies to tanks. So he gets a lucky, not easy, but a lucky bounce from the T-3485M or whatever it was. And now we're down to a critical junction. So I've been kind of yapping. You've watched him play, and he's doing a nice job. A very nice job of managing his autoloader, moving to positions, taking shots, and then moving out of those positions and coming in from a different angle. And a mobile autoloading medium like this, that's exactly what you want to do with it. That leverages all of its strengths and minimizes some of its weaknesses. He got a pretty lucky bounce back there on one, but that's cool. The question is not that you get lucky, because we all do on occasion. The question is, what do you do with it? He finds the Hellcat doing I don't know what, and down he goes. And now we're on a reload. So we've got 13 AP, 12 APCR. He hasn't really needed to press number 2. Maybe had he gone down there and fought the 112 head on earlier, he might have gone to gold, but he's at 3,500 damage. But now it's a 2v2. Poor Panther's in trouble, though. The RHM can take a hit. He can take about 3 or 4 hits, actually, depending on what the rolls are. 3 at least. There's 1, so he's able to soak that up. Now he just eats the Panther alive. And Major Tom's, he's definitely a one-shot to the RHM, and he needs 2 shots to kill the RHM. So think about that for just a minute. You are in this position, and think about how you want to handle this thing, right? You cannot just walk into the RHM because you can't take a hit. So if you had a bunch of hit points, you might try that. Although with a Lorraine and a soft tank like that, you do have to be careful. If he's carrying that, is it 150 millimeter, whatever the big one is, and he loads HE, he can do quite a bit of damage. So depending on what your hit point level is, you'd have to make that calculation on whether you want to take him on. I don't know what gun that RHM is using. You may have noticed the damage that's been dropping. I don't know. So that's one thing. That's intel you could use for making your decision. But let's talk about where Major Tom is. He's at 180. So it doesn't matter what gun the guy has. He can't really stand in and take a shot. So that means he needs to find the guy and get a shot in without being hit and get another shot in, obviously, before he gets hit. Which means that even if you come in behind him and get a shot off, depending on where that guy's gun is, you may not have time to even take that second shot in the clip, the 2 or 2.5 second reload. So these are all things he needs to think about. He also has the arty to worry about. So really what he needs to do is sneak around and kill one or the other off first, and then figure out how to deal with the second one. And he knows the arty is over there. Initially, I think he was probably hoping the RHM would come around the corner, or maybe he was worried that he would just drive around the corner and he didn't want to be caught moving. Once he proves the RHM's not coming, he backs up a couple more bushes. He might get a double bush shot there depending on the angle and everything. And then I like that he keeps on backing up, because really this is not a great spot for him right here. If that RHM comes around the corner, he takes one shot and the RHM's gun is pointed in his direction. The RHM has a really good chance of ending the game. So he comes around the corner, a little bit dangerous sticking your butt out right there. I think it would have backed right up that hill actually and not stuck my butt out, because once he swung wide a little bit, that gave him view of you if he came around. But this is an interesting series now. This gets really wacky. So he finds the RHM is looking right at him. Holy cow. Dude misses. There goes what I think is the artillery. He comes in. He drives up on this ridge a little bit. So you got to watch that kind of stuff. And then he thinks, you know what, I can't. I think he was hoping to maybe come around the corner and catch the M44 off to the right so that he could isolate a shot at the M44 and not take one from the RHM. That little poke right before that, I would not have done. If that RHM had still been sitting there, which if I was him, I would have, that would have probably ended the game. But you got lucky. He's not very good. Let's talk about that as well. Let me pontificate. Because he's dealing with what is probably, or what is proven to be a very passive player, likely to be not a great player, that means that you can do some things, be a little bit more aggressive, as long as you don't YOLO into them, because they are mentally on their back foot. They're always trying to get away or get a shot that they perfectly cannot take a shot back from. That allows you to be carefully aggressive and actually gives you an advantage. Watch what happens here, because this is exactly how it plays out. Comes down here, he sees him, the RHM sees him, the RHM is trying to back up. Not trying to go after him or anything, just trying to back up. I'd have just sat there, if I was at RHM, I'd have stopped, and this is interesting here. Okay, that went into the dirt, and the M44 missed, but that was his last shot, which goes back to probably the only mistake that he made as far as clip management was, is I would not have gone into that last engagement. Right after I killed that RHM, I'd have scooted away and reloaded. But he does a little bit of skateboarding action right there, sliding on the rails, backs up. Now he knows that M44 reloads relatively quickly, so clearly that thing is reloaded. He knows he's got a long reload. That M44 should have taken that opportunity to try to chase down the Lorraine. But he turtles up like most bad players do. And he's trying to spin, and this is pretty funny. He comes up here and we get a, oh golly. It's a crit, no damage, but it tracked him, and that puts an end to the ace mastery for Major Tom in his Lorraine 40T, showing you how to do it. If you're not going to go to the meta position, at least be active. Make sure you leverage the tank you're driving. So nice job overall, man. A long discussion, just some philosophical things about how maybe the way I approach it will differ from the way that you approach it. I was about to say that neither way is wrong, but I actually believe one of them is righter than the other. Let's put it that way. And it's possible I'm not righter, if that's a word. I mean, I'm only running 58, so there are people running 60s, even up to 70s solo at times, depending on the tank. 60s with nearly any tank, and up in the 70s, depending on the tanks that they're picking. So there is probably a righter way. Probably. But it's all food for thought, right? You can play the game the way you want. You can actually play well in multiple ways, so that's good. And hopefully we're learning some of those multiple ways. And I would say that Major Tom gave us one example there, which was very fantastic. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Major Tom, thanks for sending that in, man. For everybody else, we will see you out there.